Pacific Rim Uprising stars John Boyega. Love John Boyega. He's really become a rising star in the past number of years. And it stars Scott Eastwood, also Clint Eastwood's son, and is directed by Stephen DeKnight, who has never directed a movie. He's only directed TV shows, and this is actually his feature film debut. And it is produced by the director of the original, Guillermo del Toro. This one isn't as good as the first. Let's just say that right off the bat. And also spoilers. Spoilers ahead in case you clicked on the title and did not see that. Spoilers. Not that there's a ton really to spoil. But again, John Boyega, hugely entertained in this. I mean, yeah, some of the stuff talking about like how good looking he is or how good looking somebody else is, that might get a little tiring, but still, it's funny. I mean, Boyega is working the best with the limited material that he has. But the first Pacific Rim, of course, you had the mechs, Jaegers, the giant monsters, kaiju. And you have a few returning characters from the first one. Gottlieb, who was the weird British, guy with the limp. And Newton, who's played by Charlie Day. And also Mako, who was the young lady that Idris Elba saved as a very young girl in the first one. And and they return and stuff like that. And again, spoilers, just going to tell you, Mako dies because you got her as the sister to, John Boyega, and he tries to save her, and it doesn't work so well because none of this stuff works so well, and he's got to have a little emotional depth, like where it's like, okay, now I'm going to go after this evil, this like rogue Jaeger, and that's kind of where we're at with the movie, because this takes place 10 years after the events of the first one, where they close the portal and the kaiju can no longer get through. Okay, we'll see about that. But John Boyega, who is Idris Elba's character's son, Jake, he's a scavenger and just trying to make ends meet and stuff like that, and explains in a goofy narration, for there are always goofy narrations with this, that people will look the other way, higher ups will look the other way as long as you don't go to scrap yards like Jaeger scrap yards. Well, there are some that are building their own Jaegers, like Kaylee Spaney, the actress Kaylee Spaney who played Amara. And her and Boyega were about the two standouts here. They were really enjoyable. Everybody else, I mean, Scott Eastwood was fine. Then of course you had like I said, Gottlieb and Newton. And I do want to point out there's one in this movie, and I just want to say it first. It's like there are a few attractive women in the whole thing, and there's a lot of stock characters, like there's a lot of stock cadets and that kind of stuff, and you don't really get to know them, and you don't really need to. But again, taking place 10 years after, people are trying to pick up the pieces. There are still kaiju skeletons and remains lying around. Well, it turns out that Luwen Shou, who's played by Qian Jing, and my God, she's lovely. I don't know much about her. She was apparently in the Great Wall in Kong Skull Island. But my God, she's lovely. I need to see her in more movies. I think for what material she was provided, she also did fine. I don't know how multiple people could have written this movie because there isn't a lot to it. Mechs, kaiju, Jaegers and kaiju smash into each other over and over, and there you go. Characters yell cliches and stuff like that, and John Boyega's character can be like, John Boyega can be much like Idris Elba's character, only maybe not as good. And that's nothing against John Boyega, but it was kind of like paying fan service and that kind of stuff to people that like the first Pacific Rim. Again, I enjoyed the first Pacific Rim. Guillermo del Toro is one of my favorite directors. Pan's Labyrinth was a wonderful movie. With this plot, though, like I said, 10 years later, Luwen Shou is heading a company, a giant company that's creating drones, like drone Jaegers essentially, that are going to be remote controlled by people from a central hive essentially, and it's going to make Jaeger pilots obsolete, but it will make things a lot quicker. Well, of course, how are these drones created? Well, somebody thought it would be brilliant to genetically engineer kaiju brains and kaiju stuff and do that instead of having the pilots. So not only are not only are the the people remote controlling the drones, but you got kaiju, genetically engineered kaiju brains in here. What could possibly go? Everything went wrong. Everything went wrong. You remember in the first one how Gottlieb and Newton were the two goofs fused with the kaiju brain just temporarily to figure out how a kaiju brain thinks. Well, Newton's been keeping that brain and, jacking on and off with the damn thing. He's been just, latching onto it for 10 damn years. So naturally, what do you think's going to happen? That's right. The brain tells him the winning lotto numbers. The brain actually, takes over. And it turns out that Newton's being taken over by the kaiju alien race and that kind of stuff. And is going to screw over the entire human race. It turns out that Luen is not the evil one, but Newton is. I mean, he's being controlled. So it's like there's not really any villain to it. And that's kind of the thing, again, going back to the Kingsman, the Golden Circle comparison. In the first one, Samuel Jackson was a great villain. In the first Pacific Rim, the kaiju and the alien race saying them were great villains. I mean, there wasn't really much to them. They were giant creatures. But there was something there. In this one, Newton being the evil one and leading, because he's being, controlled by the kaiju, he's being controlled by the alien brain and that kind of stuff, or whatever, precursor, or whatever the hell they call it. I don't care about the terminology. The fact that he's the villain kind of takes a lot of the starch out of it. I mean, yes, a few kaiju appear, but for a while it's just, the Jaegers against the rogue Jaegers that are controlled by, drones and also controlled by the genetically engineered kaiju brain precursors in their head. Not controlled by people that, that have been taken over, except Newton. But it's just the drones that are infused with the kaiju stuff. So, of course, genetically engineering that stuff, genetically engineering Earth's technology with alien technology has always worked out well in these movies. But in this one, Kaylee Spaney, she did fine. John Boyega did fine. Scott Eastwood was okay. A lot of people were just stock characters. You don't go to these movies for characters. You go to them for giant action and great stuff. It's better than the Transformers movies. It's at least better than it's better than any of them after the first one. Because the first one struck some gold. It wasn't great, but it struck some gold. Yes, it's ridiculous. It does have a teaser right after the credits start, the end credits start, that, okay, because they capture Newton. I mean, there are 3 kaiju that get through the whole damn thing, and then they fuse together because Newton came up with nanites in a way to, like giant nanites that fuse these things together. But there's no danger, like a feeling like, okay, the world's going to blow up or something bad's going to happen. There's no element of danger to it, and that's kind of where I have to give this a bit of a lesser mark than the first one. Now, again, it is enjoyable. There are plenty of enjoyable action scenes in it, except this seems to care less and less about the value of humanity, like where suddenly you'll see an electrical whip being used to gather these cars, not knowing if there's people in them, and just swinging these cars like that in like a giant ball or whatever. Later, when Tokyo is invaded by these kaiju, by the few kaiju they got through, people are getting into buildings or getting smashed through buildings and this kind of stuff. Buildings are falling. Kaiju are stepping down because they're category 4 and 5, which are big ones. And very next scene, Gottlieb's like saying, okay, hey, everybody's in underground shelters. Just like that, we somehow know that. Do we have millions of cameras all around here? But again, overanalyzing this movie. You really can't overanalyze Pacific Rim Uprising. It's just fun. It's dumb fun. I will say C+, though, because it's not, well, I'll say B- for the fun, but it's not as good as the first one. The first one got like a B+, A-, because it was just great stuff. This is enjoyable, but you need to turn your brain up for it. If you expect anything big, well, that's your problem. Don't expect anything grand. Don't expect anything, emotionally, investing. and you'll enjoy it. But I think John Boyega, Kaylee Spaney, they did fine. I think they got very bright futures. And I need to see more of Tian Jing. At least I hope I pronounced that right. I need to see more of her in movies. That she lovely. Just again, lovely. You know, just saying. But anyway, that's what I gotta say. So yeah, not really much to it, but B minus for the entertainment. Not a great movie, but B minus for the entertainment. Still not as good as the first one. Anyway, like, share, comment, subscribe. Twitter link in the description. It's been Real Honesty with Jarmuth Lynn. I'm Jarmuth Lynn, and I will see you soon.